In a world where we strive for equality and fairness, it's shocking to witness moments where prejudice and discrimination rear their ugly heads. This is the story of one such incident that took place on a routine flight, but what seemed like a minor altercation quickly escalated into a major disaster. A flight attendant, blinded by her own bias, refused to serve a black passenger. Little did she know, her actions would set in motion a chain of events that no one could have predicted. What happened next would not only change her life but also shed light on the deep-rooted issues that still persist in society today. The incident began like many others on a typical flight, a bustling airport, passengers boarding, and crew preparing for another routine journey. But the simple act of refusing service to a black passenger by a flight attendant sparked a chain of events that no one could have predicted. This situation quickly spiraled out of control, revealing the dangerous consequences of unchecked prejudice. At first, the flight attendant's refusal seemed like an isolated incident, something that might be dismissed as an unfortunate misunderstanding. However, it quickly became clear that there were much deeper issues at play. What initially seemed like an isolated act of bias triggered a larger conversation, sparking anger and frustration from the passengers on board, many of whom witnessed the exchange. What unfolded next was a reminder of how small actions can have ripple effects that reach far beyond their immediate context. As the flight continued, the uncomfortable atmosphere in the cabin grew palpable, with passengers whispering, exchanging looks of disbelief, and questioning the behavior they had just witnessed. It wasn't long before word of the flight attendant's actions began to spread beyond the confines of the aircraft. The incident reached social media, and it went viral, spreading like wildfire. People shared the story, expressed their outrage, and called for accountability, turning a small incident into a global conversation about racial prejudice and discrimination in the workplace. For the flight attendant, what seemed like a minor decision, refusing to serve one passenger, had ignited an entirely new crisis. What followed was a cascade of consequences, from public backlash to legal scrutiny, that would forever change her life. The airline had to address the issue publicly and issue an apology. The flight attendant's career was thrust into jeopardy, and the company faced intense scrutiny from the public and media alike. What started as a simple action snowballed into a public relations nightmare for the airline and its employees. The story captured the attention of the media, became a topic of discussion in homes, schools, and offices across the world, and even prompted government leaders to call for investigations into workplace discrimination. This unforeseen chain of events serves as a powerful reminder of how one person's discriminatory actions can reverberate through society, affecting more lives than initially realized. The flight attendant's refusal to serve the black passenger wasn't just an isolated incident, it was a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained bias and discrimination can be in everyday interactions. Whether intentional or not, such actions reflect the subconscious prejudice that continues to persist in modern society. The refusal wasn't just about a missed drink or snack. It was about the broader context of race, privilege, and the way certain groups are treated in society. Bias often operates quietly, in the background, influencing decisions and actions in ways that we may not always recognize. In this case, the flight attendant's actions were driven by racial stereotypes, an assumption that the black passenger was somehow unworthy of the same service as other passengers. This subtle form of bias is often the hardest to identify, as it is so deeply rooted in social and cultural norms that many don't even question it. What made this incident particularly alarming was the fact that it occurred in a public space, where a service worker, who is entrusted with treating all passengers with fairness and respect, allowed her biases to dictate her actions. In a professional setting, especially in customer service roles, it is expected that employees maintain a neutral and respectful attitude toward all customers. The failure to do so in this instance speaks to a larger problem that exists in many workplaces, particularly in industries where employees are in direct contact with a diverse range of people. Racial discrimination, though often subtle, can have severe consequences. This flight attendant's bias led to a breakdown in customer service and created an uncomfortable, hostile environment for everyone on board. The impact wasn't just felt by the passenger who was denied service, but by everyone who witnessed it. Those around him felt the discomfort of witnessing an injustice and were forced to grapple with their own feelings about what had transpired. In many ways, this incident was a microcosm of the broader issues of racial inequality that continue to affect society today. The flight attendant's actions, while seemingly insignificant at first glance, were part of a larger, ongoing pattern of discrimination that affects people of color in all areas of life, from education and employment to healthcare and housing. This event served as a painful reminder that despite years of progress, racial bias still exists in everyday interactions, and much work remains to be done to confront and eliminate it. What began as a seemingly minor incident quickly escalated into a full-blown confrontation. The flight attendant's refusal to serve the black passenger ignited tensions that quickly spread throughout the plane. Passengers, uncomfortable with the exchange, began speaking out, and the mood shifted from casual to confrontational. The confrontation escalated not just because of the flight attendant's actions but also because of the collective response from the passengers. People began to speak up, challenging the flight attendant's behavior and calling for action. The situation went from a quiet, individual issue to a public spectacle. Some passengers asked to speak with the airline's management, while others recorded the incident on their phones. The flight attendant's refusal to serve one person had now caught the attention of many. This escalation highlights how even small acts of prejudice can rapidly snowball when the wider community becomes involved. When individuals witness injustice and choose to speak out against it, it can create a larger movement of resistance. In this case, the passengers' collective outcry amplified the situation, adding fuel to an already volatile exchange. What made the situation even more intense was the flight attendant's apparent lack of remorse or understanding. She didn't just refuse to serve the passenger, but also appeared defensive and dismissive of the complaints from other passengers. This lack of acknowledgement only heightened the conflict, making it clear that her behavior was not an isolated mistake but part of a larger issue. The situation reached its peak when a passenger demanded that the flight attendant be removed from the flight, creating a tense standoff. The passengers who were in support of the black man who had been denied service rallied together, while others remained silent or reluctantly sided with the flight attendant. This division created a palpable tension in the cabin, making it clear that the situation was no longer about just one flight attendant's behavior. It was about larger societal issues of race and inequality. As the incident spread beyond the flight, the issue of accountability became central to the conversation. It wasn't just about the flight attendant's actions, it was about holding those in positions of power responsible for ensuring that such behavior was not tolerated. The airline was under immense pressure to respond to the situation swiftly and decisively. As more details about the incident emerged, the company found itself facing a public relations nightmare. The airline's failure to address the flight attendant's discriminatory behavior threatened to damage its reputation and credibility. In the age of social media, companies can no longer hide from accountability. Every action, no matter how small, is subject to the scrutiny of the public. In this case, the airline had to act quickly to address the situation. They issued a public apology and promised an internal investigation into the matter. But the public wasn't satisfied with mere words. The passengers, the media, and social media users were all demanding concrete action. Public accountability in this case was not just about an apology from the airline. It was about ensuring that such behavior wouldn't be tolerated in the future. The company needed to make it clear that discrimination had no place in their business, and that the flight attendant's actions would be addressed appropriately. This incident also sparked a broader conversation about the need for better training and policies to prevent discrimination in the workplace. The airline, along with many others, was forced to confront the reality that many employees may harbor biases that are not being properly addressed, leading to systemic issues of racial discrimination. Accountability in this context wasn't just about responding to the incident. It was about changing the culture and systems that allowed it to happen in the first place. Social media played a pivotal role in bringing the story to the public eye. In the past, such incidents might have remained isolated, but today, thanks to platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, they can quickly go viral and spread across the globe. In this case, Passengers who witnessed the incident shared their experiences online, and the story gained traction almost immediately. As more people shared the post, the story was picked up by news outlets, amplifying the outrage and driving the conversation forward. Social media allowed the voices of those who were affected by the incident to be heard, and it forced the airline to confront the situation head-on. What made social media so powerful in this context was its ability to amplify the voices of everyday people. In a matter of hours, the incident was being discussed by people all over the world, from activists to everyday citizens. This kind of widespread attention can be both a powerful tool for social change and a source of immense pressure for companies and individuals who are caught in the public eye. The viral nature of the story meant that it wasn't just the flight attendant and the airline that were being scrutinized. It was the entire system that allowed this kind of behavior to occur. Social media gave people a platform to share their outrage and demand change, and it became a catalyst for broader discussions about racial discrimination and the importance of accountability in the workplace. The incident exposed the need for greater corporate responsibility when it comes to addressing discrimination in the workplace. In this case, the airline was forced to take responsibility for the actions of one of its employees and address the larger issue of racism within its company. The public backlash put pressure on the airline to not only apologize but to also demonstrate that it was taking steps to ensure such behavior wouldn't happen again. The company faced a choice. It could ignore the issue, hoping it would die down, or it could take a proactive stance and implement meaningful change. The latter required more than just a public statement. It meant addressing the root causes of bias within the organization, ensuring that employees were properly trained to handle diverse customer interactions, and promoting a culture of inclusion and respect. The company's response to the incident could set a precedent for how other corporations handle similar situations. If the airline merely offered a surface-level apology and went back to business as usual, it would risk being accused of performative activism, where actions are taken only for show rather than creating lasting change. However, if the airline implemented tangible policies aimed at preventing future incidents, it would show a genuine commitment to fighting discrimination in all forms. This scenario underscores the broader responsibility that corporations have to their customers and employees. When a company provides a service, it is implicitly guaranteeing that all customers will be treated equally, regardless of race, gender, or background. By taking responsibility and implementing systemic changes, the airline had the potential to not only rectify the situation but also lead by example, influencing others to follow suit in combating workplace discrimination. For the flight attendant, the events following her refusal to serve the black passenger were both a wake-up call and a turning point. She found herself in the midst of an uproar, facing professional consequences, public outrage, and a level of scrutiny that few were prepared for. What began as an impulsive action, a decision driven by her own biases, turned into a life-altering experience that forced her to confront her prejudices and reflect on her actions. Personal reflection in this context goes beyond simply recognizing that what happened was wrong. It involves a deep and uncomfortable reckoning with one's own views and attitudes. The flight attendant had to come to terms with the fact that her behavior reflected a deeper bias that was not unique to her alone but part of a larger societal issue. She had to ask herself why she had made the decision she did, and what it said about her assumptions and stereotypes toward others. This period of reflection was crucial for her growth. It wasn't enough for the flight attendant to merely apologize and move on. To genuinely grow, she had to engage in self-education, learning more about racial issues, examining her own attitudes, and seeking to understand the lived experiences of those affected by racism. Only through this introspective process could she begin to change her mindset and make amends for the harm caused. Her journey of personal growth was also a public one, as the aftermath of the incident made her a subject of conversation and critique. In many ways, this public exposure provided her with an opportunity to use her own experience to contribute to the broader conversation about racial discrimination and bias. As she reflected on her actions and began to take steps toward personal improvement, her story could become a powerful example of the potential for change and growth. The experience was also a reminder that personal reflection and growth are not always easy, but they are essential in confronting prejudice. The flight attendant's story became a larger metaphor for society, highlighting how individuals and institutions must be willing to examine their behaviors, acknowledge their flaws, and take active steps to create a more just and inclusive world. It was a painful but necessary process, one that she would likely never forget.